Okay, good morning. This is George Collins, and for the next hour I will be reading from the December 12th, 2025 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Headlines in the Toronto Star today, kind of a tragic story. It was a summer evening in June of 1982. Christine Prince, a 25-year-old nanny from Wales living in Toronto, got on a streetcar after a night out with friends, and her body was found the next day in the Rouge River. After entering a beige vehicle on Jarvis Street, Claire Sampson, this is another episode, a 23-year-old who'd recently moved back in with her parents, disappeared. Her body was found in a remote wooded area in 1983. In 1987, a co-worker visited the apartment of Gracelyn Greenidge, a nursing assistant from Barbados, after she didn't show up for work, and there found her body. For decades, the cases of the three women went unsolved. Finally, police say they know who was responsible for the murders of these women, and they believe there may be more victims. In a news conference at Toronto Police Headquarters on Thursday, investigators identified Kenneth Smith, now deceased, as a serial killer in the murders of the three women. The long-sought identification was made in December using genetic genealogy, an emerging investigative technique that has risen to prominence through recent arrests in high-profile U.S. cold cases. In 2001, the OPP launched Project Millennium, in which they reviewed 17 unsolved homicides to see if forensic technologies could provide leads. Sampson's case was included. It wasn't until 2016, 15 years later, that the DNA profile generated from her case matched an unknown offender from another case, the murder of Prince. The next year, the Center of Forensic Sciences determined the same offender was responsible for the murders of all three women. As technology advanced, they were able to identify close familial relatives of the offender in 2025, leading them to Smith. The evidence conclusively identified Smith as the offender in all three homicides, police said. These cases would never have been solved without this technology, said OPP Chief Superintendent Karen Gano. David Middleman, the CEO of Othram, the DNA lab and forensic genetic genealogy company used by the Toronto Police to identify Smith, said, "Unsolved crime is a choice. It's a choice because there's not a shortage of evidence. There's not a shortage of expertise." Middleman said it's about financial resources and capacity. If you want to solve 10 cases, then we'll solve 10. If you want to solve 1,000 cases, we'll solve 1,000. The process costs less than $10,000. First, Othram receives physical evidence or an existing DNA contract, which they check for suitability. Then they separate the DNA into a clear liquid, and so on and so forth. From there, Othram is able to build family trees and map a large pool of relatives to home in on the person who exactly matches the DNA. And in these cases, it was Smith, who died in 2019 at the age of 72 in Windsor, Ontario. His death means he will never be held to account in a court of law, and we recognize the impact that has on families who've waited so long for justice, said Deputy Chief Robert Johnson. If he were alive today, the Toronto Police Service would arrest Smith for the homicides of these three women, and so on. Police said it's possible that there may be additional victims and are urging anyone with information to come forward. All right, well, sorry to start the morning with such a sad case, but ultimately, the glass is half full, a relatively good result. At least they found the animal who did this. Let's see here. Toronto's Civil Services Division slammed in Watchdog report, starting off with, and here we go, the article. A probe finds that a mother was wrongfully ordered to repay $25,000. A Toronto mother was mistakenly ordered to pay back tens of thousands of dollars in social assistance to the city, an error only fixed after the city's accountability watchdog launched a probe into her case. In a report released Thursday, Ombudsman Kwame Adu makes 18 recommendations to fix shortcomings in the way the city handles social assistance benefits in a case that revealed shoddy record-keeping, improper oversight, and a lack of communication. Ado's report details how the city's Social Services Division in 2023 suddenly told a woman, identified only as Dina, that she owed $25,546 in social assistance overpayments between 2012 and 2022. Dina had been receiving financial assistance from Ontario Works, capital O, capital W, which is administered by the city's Employment and Social Services beginning in 2006. The staff calculated that a significant portion of what she owed, roughly $22,000, was attributed to, quote, unreported income, close quote, starting in 2013. The city immediately began reducing Dina's monthly $963 by $96. But that money had been received by Dina's child, Alex, who was a student and receiving support through the Ontario Student Assistance Program, which should not have been counted as Dina's income, Ado's office said. Dina said Ado's office Dina told Ado's office she had previously given the city documents to show Alex was a full-time post-secondary student multiple times over the last several years, but the documents were either lost or buried in the electronic case management system, or they were never properly entered to begin with by any of these caseworkers, the report said. Dina is quoted in Ado's report as saying, I just stopped functioning at that point. This stuff was just sending me over the edge. Ado confirmed in his report that the city did not communicate what it should have to Dina. We found that city staff did not comply with policies and also sent her inaccurate and confusing communication and failed to keep proper records, Ado said in his report. Dina asked questions. She resubmitted documents and tried to speak with management in person, but did not receive a fair response. In frustration, Dina reached out to Ado's office in early 2024, which then launched an investigation that took more than a year. As a result of Ado's probe, it was discovered that Dina ultimately would have to repay less than half the original amount, $12,800. Ado said Dina didn't report her COVID-19 Canada Emergency Response Benefit because she thought it was exempt from the city's calculations. Ado's office noted that she had not complained to them. No, let me start again. Ado's office noted that had she not complained to them, Dina likely would have repaid the city money that she never owed. In an interview, Ado said many of the issues in this case could have been prevented. It was a series of errors that compounded to make the situation worse than it should have been, he said. The report notes that social services has, quote, good procedures, close quote, in place, but, quote, staff failed to follow them and could not explain why, close quote. Ado's investigation found Dina's file hadn't been reviewed between 2012-2020, despite the province stipulating that the city carry out financial reviews every 2 years for adults receiving assistance. When a new caseworker, identified as, quote, Sandy, close quote, finally reviewed Dina's file in 2022, she had the unenviable task of going through more than a decade's worth of information, Ado wrote. The caseworker told Ado the file had, quote, a lot of missing information, close quote, because the previous caseworker's notes were, quote, really shoddy, close quote. Sandy, the caseworker, conducted 2 separate reviews of Dina's file without ever speaking to her, which Addo said denied Dina the chance to participate in a process that had a huge impact on her life. The reviews were poorly documented and failed to catch errors as well, including incorrectly filling out forms and not following templates. So this whole process teaches us that you can fight City Hall and get a good result, which is encouraging. All right. Here's a story in the headline, Drivers Get Paid to Charge EVs at Home. Drivers get paid to charge electric vehicles at home. Money comes from federal clean fuel carbon credits, once that were only available to large companies. And the subject of this report is apparently a man named Urs Villiger, U-R-S Villiger. Urs Villiger hasn't been to a gas station in months. Now that his family has 2 electric vehicles, he figures he's saving $2,000 a year in gas he doesn't have to pump. This week, that deal's getting even better. That's because Villiger has a home charger installed that pays him to charge. Villiger said, when I heard that you can actually make money charging your EV, I said, okay, let's do this, Villiger said, shortly after his charger was installed just inside his garage. Getting paid to fill up your car is just one way that EVs are turning assumptions about vehicle ownership on their head. Instead of burning gasoline, EVs consume electricity, which is a commodity that can fluctuate wildly in price over the course of a day. Meanwhile, there are times when the grid has too much electricity and will pay people to use power, as will soon be the case in parts of Australia. The idea is that EVs can and must start and stop charging at key times to help even out those peaks and troughs, offering a service that can save the grid tens or hundreds of millions of dollars by not having to pay for extra energy at peak times. This, in turn, can make electricity cheaper for everyone, EV drivers and non-drivers alike. The payments that Villiger gets come from federal clean fuel carbon credits, which were until recently only available to large companies. His home charger is provided by SWTCH Energy, a company that aggregates hundreds of EV chargers, sells the credits, and splits the revenue with customers. The head of marketing at SWTCH, Greg Orman, says because electricity is one of the cleanest fuel sources around, EV owners earn credits by charging their vehicles instead of filling up their cars with gas. It's big companies, oil companies, that pay for the credits. SWTCH's home charging program offers free chargers that pay 3 cents per kilowatt hour to charge your EV. That's almost as much as the ultra-low overnight hydro rate in Ontario, which is 3.9 cents per kilowatt. So if customers charge up between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., they can end up almost covering the cost of the power. At this rate, the company estimates that the average EV driver will earn $100 to $150 a year. Well, that's a good story. For those of you who have EV vehicles, you might want to look into that. Pardon me. Let's see here. In political news, let's see here. Well, first of all, let me pause and remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. This story, again, it's a political story, is headlined, Carney's Popularity Drops. Prime Minister Mark Carney's personal popularity took its first major hit in recent polling, while the overall numbers still show a neck-and-neck race between the Liberals and Conservatives. The polling done exclusively for the Toronto Star shows the Liberals and the Conservatives tied at 41%, with the NDP a distant third with 9% of decided voters, and the Greens at 2%. The Bloc Québécois has the support of 30% of voters in Quebec, putting them in second place behind the Liberals, who have 37% support in the province. In Ontario, the Liberals have 45% support to the Conservatives' 44%, with the NDP at 7%. The overall numbers for the parties have barely changed since this spring's election. The polling entity, run by CEO David Coletto, said voters are supporting political parties based on the issues they care about the most. People most concerned about day-to-day affordability are turning to the Conservatives, while people worried about U.S. President Donald Trump and the larger economic picture are choosing Carney's Liberals. Coletto said that will make any change in the polls difficult. Quote, "The lines have been drawn, and both of the leaders and parties really appeal to both groups so strongly that we shouldn't expect a lot of movement," he said. For this poll, the pollster surveyed 1,500 voters between December 5th and December 9th using online panels based on the Lucid Exchange platform. Opt-in polls cannot be assigned a margin of error like traditional polls, but for comparison purposes, a random sample of this size would have a margin of error of plus or minus 1.5 percentage points 19 times out of 20. Carney's personal popularity was one of the only numbers to move at all in the latest polling, with the percentage of Canadians who hold a negative view of him rising 4 points to 35, while 45% of Canadians hold a positive view of the Prime Minister. Those numbers give him a 10% favorable rating overall. By comparison, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has a negative 5 rating. Coletto said Carney's personal popularity is one thing that has kept his party ahead of the Conservatives, but the next year could change that. The pollster said that Carney has benefited from having this net favorable view for the entire time he's been in politics, and I think 2026 will now test whether he can hold that. The more the Prime Minister tries to do some big things, the initial reaction will maybe create some friction and some people who will be turned off by it. The pollster said that Carney's popularity, combined with strong support in certain regions of the country, likely means that the Liberals would be returned to government if an election were held today. But, he said, slipping personal popularity can become a major problem. The pollster said the moment that people lost trust in Trudeau, they gave up on the government. Okay, let's see here. Here's another kind of a policy article. Prime Minister Mark Carney pushed back Thursday against the suggestion that the U.S. is considering pulling out of North America's Free Trade Pact. When the Canadian press asked the Prime Minister if he was open to separate bilateral trade pacts if the U.S. withdraws, Carney said that's not what the U.S. is saying. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer floated the idea Wednesday at a public talk put on by American think tank the Atlantic Council in Washington. Greer said the pact could be dissolved, revised, or renegotiated. Could it be exited? Said Greer. Yes, it could be exited. Could it be revised? Yes. Could it be renegotiated? Yes. All of those things are on the table. Canada's most important free trade deal, the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, often referred to as CUSMA, C-U-S-M-A, is set to come up for review next year. All right. Here's kind of a surprising story coming out of Gaza. Winter storm batters Gaza. Rains wreak havoc across war-torn territory as humanitarian crisis deepens. Rains drenched Gaza's tent camps, dropping temperatures. Oh, boy. Let me start again. Rains drenched Gaza's tent camps, and dropping temperatures chilled Palestinians huddling inside the tents Thursday as Storm Byron descended on the war-battered territory, showing how 2 months of a ceasefire have failed to sufficiently address the spiraling humanitarian crisis there. Children's sandaled feet disappeared under opaque brown water that flooded the camps. Trucks moved slowly to avoid sending waves of mud toward the tents. Piles of garbage and sewage turned to waterfalls. A mother displaced to the tent camp in a part of Gaza said, "We have been drowned. I don't have clothes to wear. We have no mattresses left." Aid groups say not enough shelter aid is getting into Gaza during the truce. Figures recently released by Israel's military suggest it has not met the ceasefire stipulation of allowing 600 trucks of aid into Gaza a day, though Israel disputes that finding. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees said cold, overcrowded, and unsanitary environments heighten the risk of illness and infection. In Israel, heavy rains fell and flood warnings were in effect in several parts of the country, but no major weather-related emergencies were reported as of midday. The war in Ukraine. Peace talks continue. Territorial possession is at the center of the U.S. peace talks. Ukrainian President Zelensky said Thursday that negotiators are wrestling with the question of territorial possession in the U.S.-led peace talks on ending the war with Russia, including the future of Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region and the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, one of the world's 10 biggest nuclear plants. Zelensky revealed details of the ongoing discussions before he headed into urgent talks with leaders and officials from about 30 countries that support Ukraine's efforts to obtain fair terms in any settlement to halt nearly 4 years of fighting. In Washington, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said Trump's special envoy, Mr. Witkoff, continued to be in discussions with both sides. Ms. Leavitt said that if there is a real chance of signing a peace agreement, then the U.S. could send a representative to the talks as soon as this weekend. But Leavitt added that it's still up in the air whether we believe real peace can be achieved. Trump has long boasted, as he boasts about so many things, about being able to solve Russia's war in Ukraine in a day. But in recent months, Trump has complained bitterly about a lack of progress. Probably because your proposal favors the Russia so much. That's my editorial comment, sorry. Ms. Leavitt echoed that during her briefing with reporters on Thursday, saying the president is extremely frustrated with both sides of this war. She said the administration had spent 30-plus hours just in recent weeks meeting with officials from Russia and Ukraine, as well as Europe, and that Trump is, quote, sick of meetings just for the sake of meeting, close quote. He doesn't want any more talk, Leavitt said. He wants action. Yeah. Ukraine has submitted a 20-point plan to the U.S., with each point possibly accompanied by a separate document detailing the settlement terms. We are grateful that the U.S. is working with us and trying to take a balanced position, Zelensky told reporters, but at this moment it is still difficult to say what the final documents will look like. Russia has in recent months let me start again. Russia has in recent months made a determined push to gain control of all parts of Donetsk and neighboring Luhansk, which together make up Ukraine's valuable Donetsk industrial region. Ukraine does not accept the surrender of Donbas, Zelensky said, saying that both sides remaining where they currently stand along the line of contact would be a, quote, fair outcome, close quote. American negotiators have put forward the possibility of a free economic zone in the Donbass, with the Russians terming it a, quote, demilitarized zone, close quote, according to Zelensky. Russian officials have not publicly disclosed their proposals. The leaders of Germany, Britain, and France were among those taking part in the meeting of Ukraine's allies, which was dubbed the Coalition of the Willing. The meeting took place via video link. We take off our hats to the Ukrainians for their courage. I hope something good comes of it soon. All right. Here is some letters to the editor. First one is headlined, Alone for the Holidays and Don't Know What to Do. It's mid-December, says the writer, and I still don't have a plan for the holidays. My boyfriend and I broke up in the summer. I'm not dating anyone new. My parents have gone down to Mexico for a few months, where I am welcome, but they were invited onto a friend's boat for the holiday week somewhere that doesn't include me. I could go to Mexico, but I'd be there alone, which doesn't seem like a great idea. My sister is pregnant, so she's not doing anything but nesting. My brother lives abroad. Most of my friends are in relationships, and it just seems this year everyone is doing their own thing with their families and their partners' families. I'm trying not to panic, but I'm not the kind of person who enjoys being alone on a regular basis, and certainly not during the holiday period. What do you suggest I do? Signed, Lonely Holidays. Dear Lonely Holidays, says the author, I am a renowned list maker, so I would start with pen and paper or a note on my phone. Make a list of everyone you could possibly imagine spending your holidays with in order of love. I see what she's saying. Make a list of everyone that you could possibly imagine spending your holidays with, starting with in order of closeness to, quote, it could be fun, close quote, but not to rate people, but just so you don't mistakenly ask your ex's sister before your bestie. Your parents are away, but you could use their place in Mexico. Your brother's away. Might he want to meet you at your parents'? Your sister's pregnant and nesting. Might she want help putting together the nursery? Your friend Sarah hates her boyfriend's sister. Maybe you could steal her away from one of his family's gatherings. Look at your schedule and fill the holes as best as you can. Reach out to friends who may not know that you're now single and ask if they're doing anything fun that you could join. Then go online and see what's happening in your neighborhood, at your community center or place of worship if you have one. Good advice. Next article, or the next question, I should say. I have been wrestling this for more than a year. My work friend's son has been convicted of murder. Jeez. Because of his son's actions, he fell into alcoholism and lost his marriage, as well as appearing in court with a highly unbelievable alibi. Parentheses, I have seen him lie to his wife while sitting right next to me. Close parentheses. The case is being appealed, so my emotional roller coaster is continuing. Lately, he has been reaching out, but I have ghosted him. I don't want to get drawn back into more drama. My guilt comes from him supporting me during a mental breakdown while my other friends ran in the opposite direction. But I'm worried for my own mental health. I cannot engage with him and his ex-wife. I also don't want to have to say to his face that I think he's being taken for a ride by his son. Well, this is a little confusing. It has already cost him the house in legal fees. How can I help from a safe distance? Signed, Struggling. The response. Your friend supported you during your crisis, so I understand why you feel the need to support him. However, supporting him doesn't have to mean lying on his behalf or agreeing with his thoughts or actions. No parent wants to believe their child is capable of something as heinous as murder, but every murderer is someone's child. Your friend needs professional counseling to get through this emotional typhoon, and you need to protect yourself. You could choose to be there as a supportive listener, a shoulder to cry on, so to speak, a home where he can get a hot meal. If it gets too much, take some space. Don't get sucked in.